So Republicans and Democrats will each control one chamber of Congress for the first time under President Trump. The incoming Democratic majority in the House plans to pass legislation to reopen the government without the money President Trump wants for a border wall. It's expected to be the first of many partisan battles with the president after Democrats picked up 40 seats in the midterm elections.
Nancy Cordes joins us now from Capitol Hill to talk a little bit more about today. It's going to be a busy day for you, Nancy. Nancy Pelosi is expected to be elected as the Speaker of the House to this new Congress. What are her plans to reopen the government? I know that she said they're going to pass legislation right away, but after that, what happens?
Well, they basically are going to pass a bill that reopens government but does not provide the president the $5 billion that he is seeking to begin to build this border wall. And the Republican leader of the Senate has already said that that bill is a non-starter on his side of the Capitol, even though it essentially passed unopposed, 100-0, right before the Senate left for its winter break. So that just gives you a little taste of the partisanship that we are seeing up here. That bill passed unanimously, but then President Trump put his foot down, said he wouldn't accept it, and so that's why we are now in the middle of this 2 weeks and counting partisan standoff. So where this all goes from here after the House takes that vote to reopen the government isn't quite clear. Democrats believe that public opinion is on their side here. They know that the wall is not broadly popular, that a lot of Americans thought at the very least that Mexico should pay for it, as the president promised during the campaign. And so they feel that they are on solid ground holding firm here. But obviously, as you alluded to, Anne Marie, the longer this drags on with hundreds of thousands of federal workers not knowing when they're going to get a paycheck, especially now that winter break is over, that a lot of workers are returning to Washington and really all across the country, and finding that their future is very uncertain, that could weigh very heavily on this debate as well.
Nancy, I thought it was really interesting over the last couple of days, last couple of weeks, listening to near Speaker Pelosi talking about her interactions with the president. And this morning she said, look, it's very hard to negotiate with someone who claims he's a master negotiator but doesn't negotiate from a set of facts. In other words, she was asked about Mexico paying for the wall. She said this new trade deal in no way, shape or form will fund the building of the wall. So how does she plan to get some of the other legislative priorities she has planned for if it's really difficult to negotiate with the president?
Right. It's tricky, not only because they're not always negotiating from the same set of facts, but sometimes, the president will claim something one day only to reverse himself the next. You've seen recently that he said actually large portions of the wall have already been built, which is not true. He will sometimes agree to something in principle in those conversations, and then a few hours later, Democrats have found in past negotiations those agreements have fallen apart once he's heard from someone else. So that is a challenge that is going to be ongoing, that everyone is well aware of, Republicans as well. What Democrats say is that they're going to have to lean very heavily on public opinion, that they're going to pass a series of bills right away in the House that bring transparency to Congress, that restore voting rights that were stripped away when the Supreme Court overturned parts of the Voting Rights Act, that restore some campaign finance rules, and then they know that those bills will likely die in the Republican-controlled Senate unless they can somehow marshal public support to keep these issues alive. So you're going to see Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leaders trying to use that bully pulpit that they now have as the majority in the House to try to pressure not just the president but the Senate to sort of pick up the reins of what they're trying to do in the House. Otherwise, it's going to be a very challenging couple of years, at the very least, for Democrats when they control just the House but not the Senate or the White House.
So one of the other things that a Democratic majority in the House brings is subpoena power. You mentioned things being challenging perhaps over the next couple of years. What does this mean for the president?
Well, it's a major lever of power for the Democrats. The fact that they can threaten the administration and the White House that they will essentially, if they can't get the information that they're seeking through the regular order, they are going to try to subpoena the administration on all these different fronts to get that information instead. So they won't go directly to subpoena power, but they can, for instance, say to the administration, hey, here are the documents that we want pertaining to your handling of hurricane relief in Puerto Rico, or pertaining to how this new family separation procedure at the border, who thought of it? We want to see all the documents related to how that was put into effect. You can imagine there are dozens of investigations that House Democrats want to get underway right away. And for the past couple of years, they've been urging their Republican colleagues to ask for all these documents. But of course, Republicans were reluctant to investigate the Republican administration in many cases. And so they didn't do it. Now, House Democrats will first formally send letters asking for this information. And then if they don't get it, resort to subpoena power. Beyond that, one of the biggest powers they're going to have now is simply to call major administration figures, sometimes controversial figures, here to Capitol Hill to testify. Matthew Whitaker, for example, who is the acting attorney general, who has never testified here on Capitol Hill. House Democrats will now be able to call him before the House. They say that is going to be one of their first orders of business, to ask him about his oversight of the Russia investigation and how exactly he got his job in the first place, and whether he promised the president that he would try to curtail the activities of Robert Mueller in exchange for this position. So these are the kinds of headaches that the entire administration is going to face that it really didn't have to face over the last couple of years.
And that will be very interesting, Nancy, to see once the Democrats have the subpoena power, who they compel to appear before them to explain themselves and their actions over the last couple of years. Nancy Cordes on the Hill for us. Nancy, it's going to be a busy couple of years. Strap in.
First day of school.
Exactly. See you soon, Nancy.
Bye.